Good afternoon, and welcome to K2's Road to Excellence, Part 11, and our partner, Adagio. This is Alan Salmon, and I'm pleased that you're joining me today for this mini webinar. A little bit of admin work before we go. My good friend Marilyn Benninger is backing me up today, and she is your go-to person for technical issues and for questions. Your microphones are muted for obvious reasons. You're welcome to take notes, but be aware that Marilyn will be sending you a package within 10 days of today that will include the recording of the webinar, my extensive teaching notes, and my teaching files, the answers to all your questions, and your CPD certificate. When it comes to questions, you ask them in the chat window, and after the webinar is over, Marilyn will send us the questions. We will answer them, and the questions and answers will be in your package. And now for your CPD certificates. If you're new to our webinar, 4 times today, we're going to get stopped, and we're going to put up a polling question. That polling question is a multiple choice question. Usually has 4 or 5 responses, and you don't have to get it right. What you do have to do is select one of the choices and click on Submit. And if you're recorded as submitting at least 3 of the 4 questions, you will get a CPD certificate for 1 verifiable hour. If you don't, it'll be 1 non-verifiable hour. And now, I need to launch the first poll. Here we go. So have you used any of the following Excel functions? And you can select more than one. All right, I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to close the poll. And here's the results. Well, 2/3 of you have used VLOOKUP, and I'm not surprised that only 28% of you have used HLOOKUP. Subtotal's way up there. Some FS came in 2010. It's time now to move on to the focus for today's session, which is advanced formulas in Excel. A bit of trivia, there's in excess of 300 formulas in Excel, and you know many of them. I want to focus today on 3 or 4 of the advanced functions that allow us to search for information. So notice what I have here. Code, product, price. There's the code, there's the product, etc. And up here, I have a cell where I can enter the code. And down here, I want it to go and find the code and the price for B14. So what Excel needs to do is go here, nope, go here, nope, go here, yes, and then over 3. So I'm going to show you a neat little trick to insert the formula. I could do it manually, but if I click on the FXE up here, it opens up this box, and it really handholds you. So since I've been practicing, VLOOKUP is at the top, so we'll go to OK. What's the lookup value? Well, the lookup value is B14. Where is the table? Well, the table is here. And notice that I don't include row 1. What's the index number? Well, that's a fancy way of saying, what column do I get the answer in? 1, 2, 3. So I put a 3 in, and I don't, for now, I'm not going to put anything in the range lookup. And I click on OK, and there's the price. As soon as I hit enter to input the formula, Excel goes to here and checks A23, no. A27, no. B14, yes. Counts over 3, 1, 2, 3, 49.95, 49.90. So it found it. Well, let's see what happens if there isn't a code. So I'm going to type in B15 and watch what happens. Well, that's interesting. We got 49.95. How can that be? Well, there's two types of VLOOKUPs or vertical lookups, inexact and exact. And the one we have created here is what is called an inexact VLOOKUP. What does that mean? It means it goes here and it's looking for B15. Nope, 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 nope. So it then says, I want to go back to here and I'm going to get the 49.95. And there are times when you want an inexact lookup. But what happens if we only want to find an exact one? Well, we go up here and we put a comma in and we put in the word false. And we click on enter. And notice what it returns? NA. What happens if we put in C45? We get that. So let's review again. In the case of this, where I have a false here, that tells Excel that it's going to look up an exact lookup. So watch what happens now if we put in A28. There we go. We get the AN error. Now let's move on to an advanced example of not only using VLOOKUP, but using the companion HLOOKUP for horizontal lookup that we rarely use. I want to show you how you work them together. So I've got a quote form here, and I need to type in the item number and the quantity, and that will enter that, and that will be calculated. So where's it getting that data? Well, it's getting that data from this worksheet right here. This area here is the vertical lookup or the VLOOKUP, and I've given it a range name called VTable, which I will use in the formula. This area here is the HLOOKUP. And again, it's a range name. Let's go back to here. And I enter C001. And I'm going to look up the description with a vertical or VLOOKUP. So let me interpret that. Look up the value of A6, which is C001, in the vertical lookup table. Get the answer in the third column, and it has to be true. All right. So we find C001, third column, presto. Now, how do we get the unit price? Well, notice the quantity is 40. So here we've combined a VLOOKUP with an HLOOKUP. And we solve for the HLOOKUP first. In other words, we want to find the correct column from the HLOOKUP table to look up and get the unit price. So notice the quantity is 40. So we go to our lookup table and we go across here. 1's too small, 10's too small, 25 is too small, 50 is too large, so it drops back to 25 because this is an inexact lookup. It goes down one row and gets 6. And now we go back to here, and this formula now, all of this area here, from here to here, is a 6. So now we're going to look up A6 in the vertical table, go to the sixth column, and get the answer. So we look up this, and we go over to the sixth column, and we get 678. Now that's a bit complicated, but understand that in the material that Marilyn is going to send out within the next week, you're going to get not only this file, but the wording that I have just used. So that'll help you going through it. So there's a combination. Let's move on now to what we call Boolean Logic. And that's just a fancy way of saying an if statement. So we've got a budget here. We've got actual for the various accounts. And I want to know what the variance is. So I'm going to create an if statement because it's possible that I will get division by 0 right here. And that will create an error message. So to eliminate that, I'm going to do an if statement here. And this gets translated like this. If C7 is greater or less than 0, then subtract C7 from D7 and divide by C7. And the dollar signs are in there so that I can copy the file down. So if it's true, I want that. If it's false, I want a blank. So I've got it here. Let's move it down. And I'm going to do the double click here. And you notice that it's blank here. Why? Because we're dividing by 0. In this example, we're using what is called the AND if function. If this is true and this is true, then do this. If it isn't, then do something else. So let's go here, and first of all, let's check the variance. Well, it's just D7 minus C7. But now we're going to use an AND function, or the AND function. So it's an if statement. And notice that the AND goes immediately after the first bracket instead of between here where you would logically say it. So the other thing that I'm using here is the absolute function. So ABS means just put in the value, whether it's positive or negative. So we take E7, which is that. So if E7 is greater than 0.05 and F7 is greater than 1,000, then put in true. Now, when you look at this and you understand that Excel isn't going to treat this as a minus sign, it's going to treat this as no sign, so it is greater than 0.05, and F7 is also greater than 1,000, so it returns true. Now we have a function called OR. If this is true or this is true, then do something else. So again, we've got 9.65%, and or we've got that, so it's true. So here's the third one that I can't remember the last time I used it, which is if not F7 is greater than 0, then true, else blank. So is F7 not greater than 0? Yes, it's true. The same thing here. Now, on this one, if E9 is greater than 0.05, is E9 greater than, oh, yes, it is. Remember, this is absolute. And F9 is greater than 1,000. On this one, notice what the formula is here. If and absolute, E9 is greater than 0. E9 is greater than 0. and F9 is greater than 1,000. F9 is not. So this is a blank. And you can go through these on your own if you're interested in how this works and check out my formulas. So now let's go back to VLOOKUPs. One of the things that I certainly don't want in a VLOOKUP table is error messages. So how do I get rid of an error message? Well, we use a formula called if error. So if we go here, C1001, and then go here, let's forget about the if error first. We're doing a VLOOKUP on C5, C001. The table is B13 to F25, and we get the answer in the third column. So there we go. Third column is that. And you notice that it's false. So that means if it's true, that if they don't find anything. So if C01 is not found, then we'll get an error message. But if we put in if error at the beginning and then put in what to do if it's not found, which in this case is item not found, we'll never get an error message. Let me prove it. I'm going to put in C004, item not found. And there we go. In this one, notice that I'm not using if error. So if it's not found, I'll get the error message. So I will invariably use if error to bulletproof a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP, by the way. Next, I want to cover another useful advanced formula called SUMIF. So if I wanted to know what the total of all of the Northeast region lines were here, I could do a sort on the region and then put a subtotal at the bottom of Northeast, South, Midwest, and Northeast. That's a lot of work. So instead of that, I'm going to use a formula called SUMIF. And what this says is do a sum if B7 to B42 is equal to F8, meaning Northeast, and sum D7 to D42, which is here. So the reason that you can see the formula there is that I have turned the formula into text. And you'll notice the little apostrophe there. Well, if I take the apostrophe out, it's going to work the formula. So there we go. Check column B for Northeast. And if it's Northeast, add this up. So the way it's going to work is it's going to go here. Yep, add that. Nope, nope, add, and so on. So let's see what we get. And there we go. Now, I would argue that that is much, much faster than doing a sort and a subtotal. Let's do another one. This time we're checking for lotions, which is in C. So we want to do a sum if C7 to C42 is equal to F14, meaning lotions, and add the numbers up in D42. And again, I will take off the apostrophe, and there we go. Now, that works fine if we only want to check one item, Northeast, etc., etc. But what happens if we want to check product line within a region? For example, I want to check for Northeast and lotions. Up until Excel 2007, we would have had to do a complicated if statement. In 2010, Microsoft introduced a new formula called sum if s. So let's see how this works. So we're checking for lotions in Northeast. And the logic here is different. Up here, we check for the column that we want to check and what it's equal to. With sum if s, we check for where the answer is going to go. And then we do the check on the variables. So what we're saying is do a sum if B7 to B42 is equal to F41, and if C7 to C42 is equal to G20. Well, let's see what happens. And there we go. So what it's done is check that. No, 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 no. Northeast lotions, yes. And the beauty of sum if s is that we could add another variable, another thing to test, and so on. So there's a very powerful function in terms of doing math. Next, I want to move on to another highly useful advanced Excel function, and that is called the subtotal function. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got a departmental expenses worksheet, and we have two departments, tax department, audit department, and some totals. Now, for most of you, if you were creating this total here, you would merely add those numbers up. And the same thing here. And the same thing here and here. And then the total would be equal that plus that. However, if you use the subtotal command, it's very easy, particularly if you have a lot of subtotals to add up. So in here, notice the formula that I'm using. Equal subtotal 9, comma, C5 to C10. Well, the C5 to C10 makes sense, but what is the function of the number 9? Well, there's a variety of subtotals that we could create. Normally, we create a subtotal that is a sum, but it could be an average, a count, and so on. So to define what type of subtotal in there, there is a master list, and I've duplicated it here. So 1 is average, 2 is count, and so on. And when we get down here, we find 9 for sum. So what this says in reality is do a subtotal of C5 to C10 and do it as a sum. And the same thing down here. Equal subtotal C13. Now, in this cell, you would expect the formula to be this plus this, but notice something weird. Again, I've used the subtotal function. And notice the range, C5 to C19. In other words, I'm including all of the numbers from there to there in my subtotal. And you're going to say, but you're including the subtotals. You're absolutely right. However, notice that the numbers visually are correct. So what happens is when I do a grand total, which this is, and include subtotals in the range, it ignores the subtotal. So let me give you a visual or an audio demonstration of how effective that is. Let's assume that you have 1,000 rows of data broken into 10 subtotals with 100 rows each. So in the normal process of things, you would create a subtotal using the sum function for each of those 10 subtotals. And then at the bottom for the grand total, you would do what I call the plus, plus, plus approach. Equal the first subtotal plus the second, and so on. Instead of that, all you've got to do in row 1011 is go equal subtotal 9 and the total range, and you've got it. Now, there is another type of subtotal that uses 109. And you're going to want to know what's the difference. Well, there's a major one. So let me do this. Notice the total here is 12,760, and the total here is 12,760. Let me hide row 9. Notice it's still 12,760 when I use the 9, because it is still counting the hidden row. Notice over here with 109, it's not counting it. And which one I use depends on what I'm doing. So let's look at a real life example of this. Let's go to a balance sheet. And there's nothing magic about it. There we go. So notice what total cash is. I've used the subtotal. Same thing for accounts receivable. Same thing for total inventory, J23 to J24. Same thing here, J19 to J25. And then finally, notice the current assets. They start at the very top and they come down to here. In other words, they're adding up they're creating a grand total and ignoring the subtotal. And the same thing down here when we go to the liability side. Subtotal, 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 subtotal. Now, the total of current liabilities, and then we add in the long term, and we get the total liabilities. Again, notice J37 to J62. We look at the equity side of the balance sheet. There it is there. So there's the total equity, J64 to J68. And then the total liabilities and equity, we go back to J36. There we are here. And we get the totals. So I use subtotals a lot. Why? Because it simplifies and saves me time. And for me, that's the name of the game. So that's it for my session. I hope I've shown you some advanced Excel functions that will be highly useful in your work in Excel going forward. And now it's time for my last poll. Poll is a look ahead at our next session in September, when Ward Blatch will be introducing you to a brand new function in Excel called dynamic arrays. Absolute wonder in terms of getting data. So we got 91%. I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wow, we got some super advanced people here, and relax, it's not that complicated as Ward will show you. So now it's time for us to change presenters and bring in my good friend, Andrew Bates.
Thanks, Alan. Okay. Always a pleasure to listen to a presentation of yours, Alan. For those of you who have heard me talk about Adagio over the prior months, we've been a kind of regular participant in the Road to Excellence webinars. For those of you who have never heard of Adagio, we've been shipping this fairly full-featured accounting suite since 1999. We're a Canadian-based accounting developer out of Vancouver, BC, where it's sunny and heading to overcast and rain as usual this morning. Adagio is multi-user, it's multi-module. That means that if you just need general ledger and accounts payable, that's all you need to buy. It's multi-currency. It's sold through a network of North American resellers who will help you set it up and install it and get it configured for your particular business. It's highly configurable. I'm going to show one of the strengths of Adagio today. I'm going to talk about the custom reporting side, because if you're currently using an entry-level product such as Sage 50 or QuickBooks, you'll know that your reporting options are fairly limited and really constrained by what the developers decided you should be able to look at when you're looking at when you're running the application. And one of the things that differentiates organizations as they get larger is that people in the company begin to realize that the accounting department is keying a lot of information into the computer and should be able to answer just a quick question. I'm sure that all of you have had people poke their head in your office and say, I just have a quick question. And if you're familiar with the data that you're keying in, you've usually known that it would be possible to get them an answer, although maybe not quite as quickly as they might like. We have, or as you might like. We have specialized solutions for wholesale distribution and job costing for construction and time and billing for architects and engineers and accountants even. And we have specialized reporting tools, one of which I'm going to show you today, GridView. This just positions Adagio. We're designed for, we're batch-based, because as you get bigger and you have multiple people entering data into the accounting system, batches are better. They're much easier to control. They're easier to train with when you have someone new in the accounting department. When you're doing all the data entry into your accounting system, you can make pretty much anything work, because you know the reports you're trying to get to and how transactions can be coded. And if a transaction goes missing for one reason or another, you're likely to be able to find it because you entered it and you'll have some recollection of that. But as soon as you have a new AP clerk or a new AR clerk and they're doing data entry, if something gets miscoded, then there can be an enormous search through the data in order to find the missing transaction. So batches allow one person to do data entry and another person to check the data that's been entered before it gets posted into the accounting system. So what else can I tell you about it? We're designed for organizations managing between 2 and 100 million in revenue. We have a very large presence in the First Nation not-for-profit space because of the strength of our custom reporting solutions and our auditability. Really easy to audit Adagio, very complete audit trails, posting sequence numbers to keep track of when things, the order in which things were posted, the ability to post transactions to fiscal periods other than the date of a transaction, something that's very difficult to do in the entry-level products. So all that stuff that you went to accounting school to learn, where the revenue and expenses should be allocated to the periods in which they occur, that's all very easy to do within Adagio. We have, as I said, solutions for wholesale distribution and professional services companies and all those organizations. Well, wholesale distribution has a whole separate set of requirements, usually around order management and RMAs and inventory costing. Inventory is one of those things that tends to drive people off the entry-level products, management of inventory, because it's very difficult to manage an inventory of any size if the lookup is by item description and you don't have a coding scheme around part numbers. And it's also difficult if you don't have flexible costing methods. We support 5 different costing methods: average, as you would expect, FIFO, LIFO, standard costing, and user-defined costing, so that you can enter the cost of an item as it's entered on an invoice for those non-stocked items that you're selling to your customers. We also do full order management with future orders and standing orders and partial ships and automated shipping of orders as inventory is received and orders become eligible. You have enough inventory on hand to fulfill an order. We'll automatically give you a list of the orders that could be fulfilled, and you can control whether only complete orders are shipped or only complete lines on an order are shipped, or to ship whatever is possible to be shipped. What else can I tell you? We expect there to be a full-time accounting department at an Adagio site. At least one person, of course, with the familiarity, basic familiarity with the difference between a debit and a credit. Although I will say that over 2/3 of Adagio sites have 2 or 3 people in the accounting department, chief financial officer or controller, working in the GL and the bank, and then an AP clerk and or an AR clerk. Of course, we don't count salespeople who are entering orders into the accounting system as working in the accounting department. But normally Adagio shines very brightly in organizations with multiple people. No IT department. We have a very light IT footprint. And in fact, with cloud, it's even lighter. Adagio Cloud requires virtually no IT infrastructure to provide all of the benefits of Adagio. We're report driven. We expect people to be doing reports, doing financial statements every month, managing the company through the presentation, the production of financial statements, and looking at inventory movement with sales reports and things like that. And let's see, what else can I tell you? Oh, I have a poll that I think I'll launch here just to make sure that people are paying attention. And the poll is, what do you use when you have a need for a report which is not handled by your out-of-the-box accounting product? So, because there are different tools available that you'll be pointed to. You might get, I see a lot of people using Excel. Of course, you know, Excel is the world's most popular accounting module. It's used by all accounting departments, as far as I can tell, to put in place functionality that should actually be managed by their accounting system. So we'll let a couple more come in. I see that some of you are using Crystal reports. That requires a certain amount of bravery, as Crystal is a product designed more for postdoctoral computer science students than mere mortals. Here, I'll just share this with you just to show you. I'll close the poll now since we're over 80. And let's see. So the interesting thing for me is that 3% of you are prepared to tell people that you can't produce the report, which shows a lot of bravery on the account of the accounting department. And for 8% of you, it's not applicable, which presumably means that you have never had a request for a report from a request for some numbers out of the accounting system that you knew you had the data for, but didn't know how to get at the data. So I'll hide this poll, excuse me, and come back to our slides. The Adagio General Ledger I've talked about before, and the financial reporter. That's a very special type of customized reporting solution in the financial statement presentation. I'm not going to talk about it at all today because today I want to concentrate on a tool that we have specifically designed to answer the how many and how much type of questions. But we support both 12 and 13 fiscal periods in the GL with a year-end adjustment period. And the financial statement layout is independent of the chart of accounts. So in the entry-level products, when you add an account into your general ledger, you tell the product where on the pre-formatted financial statements you want this account added to. In Adagio, you just add the account into your chart of accounts, and the financial statement can be prepared and laid out to your specifications with summarized numbers, with an arbitrarily summarizing accounts in your GL or doing them on a detailed basis. So from a reporting point of view, there's several options within Adagio. Our standard reports have a large number of options. As an exercise, once I figured out how many different ways there was to print just the GL detailed listing, and got well north of 22 million different ways according to the options that you select. So while all of our reports are done with Crystal Reports, which is the management reporting tool of choice for most of the accounting vendors on the planet, we put in front of Crystal Reports a report dialog that allows you to choose a whole range of options, like different ranges of data to print, what order you want the data presented in. So do you want transactions in document number sequence, or date sequence, or customer number sequence, or control account sequence, or salesperson sequence? And once you've chosen the sequence, you can control whether you get page breaks on change of the sorted values, or subtotals on change of the sorted values. And for most of the major reports, you can just click a button and send the report to Excel, pre-formatted as a table, so that the data can actually be used. It's sent as an Excel table with filters and column headings all set up ready for you to go, so that you can start doing analysis or create a pivot table or a pivot chart directly from the data that you sent out of Adagio. I've shown before that the grids in Adagio are completely flexible, and you can put whatever fields you want out of the file on the grid, and then drop the grid into Excel if you want to do some kind of reporting in Excel. We've found that people make a lot of use of that feature because they're familiar with the way Excel works, and they're comfortable doing filtering and sorting and subtotaling in an Excel environment. So virtually every grid in Adagio can be sent to Excel. So today I'm going to talk about grid view. And grid view came about because the majority of ad hoc requests that come into the accounting office are requests to count something, either how many or how much. So how many blue widgets did we buy? How many vendors do we have that we owe more than $5,000 to? How many customers have done more than this amount of business with us? What's the total balance outstanding for this salesperson? And we wanted a tool that would allow someone to easily answer those questions. It has a full security model, because grid view allows you to report on any of the data in Adagio. So it's a very powerful tool, and you might want to restrict the tool so that people can only see the data that you would like them to see. So you don't want the AP clerk poking around in the bank reconciliation module to see what the bank balances are, for example. Or you don't want the sales guy who's looking at the total orders for his customers to be able to go and look up revenue in the GL. But you can report on any of the tables within Adagio. And once you've designed a workspace or a set of views for someone, you can drop that inquiry directly to a user's desktop. So on their desktop, they can have an icon that they can click. So if you have someone who keeps coming into the accounting department and asking the same question over and over and over again, you can build an inquiry for them that answers their question, and then drop it on their desktop and say, please, just to save me a bit of time, don't bother coming into the office every time and asking me the same question over and over again. Just click on this shortcut, and your questions will be answered. In my experience, virtually every accounting department has someone in the organization entitled to look at data that's in the accounting system and poke around in it and ask random questions of it that they'd really rather not have in the accounting software itself. Frequently, that's the business owner who may not have a very clear idea of how accounting works. But this tool allows you to put an inquiry function on that person's desktop to let them either have a restricted view of the data that you control or what they're allowed to see, or allows them to go and poke around to their heart's content. And since the tool is read only, it does not impact any of the processing speed or performance for the other people working in the accounting environment. So one of the nice things about grid view is not only can it access all the Adagio data files, but it can also access any ODBC compliant data source, like Microsoft Access Table or a SQL database, or any other type of data format. Even a CSV file that's well-formed can be read with grid view. It can also read any well-formed Excel spreadsheet. And by well-formed, I mean an Excel spreadsheet that has a table with column headings and types defined for the data elements in the table. So as long as if you have an Excel table, you can also read that information into a grid view and use it to manipulate or do math with and that kind of thing. And that's useful because end users can maintain the data in Excel tables. So if you have commission calculation workspaces, for example, that are calculating salespeople's commissions, then you can change the commission structure and rates and things like that in an Excel spreadsheet, and rules maybe of what items actually are commissionable and things like that can be maintained in Excel, which is a familiar environment for your users. Let's see. Let's just hop over to grid view here, and we'll launch grid view. And I'll just give you a bit of a flavor of the kind of things that you can do with grid view. The first thing you have to tell grid view is what module you would like to report on. So we might as well start with receivables. Most people are familiar with receivables. It's the kind of thing that you would probably want to put on a desktop. And we're going to take a look at some customers. We'll look at the customer master, accounts receivable, customer master. And then we get a list of all the fields that are in the customer master. And you'll see it's a very long list of fields that we maintain about customers, period to date and year to date statistics of invoices and credit notes and cash and highest balances and last payment dates and the credit card expiries and optional fields, and just the list goes on and on. So it can be hard to find the fields that you're looking for, but you can sort or search for them up here. So I'm going to put the customer number and the customer name on my list, and I'd like to see the balance outstanding, and I'd like to see the invoice total year to date, and invoice count year to date. There, that's a good list. Okay. I can add filters. Oh, so I could have a filter like large customers, large balances. No, we'll do customers. And large customers would be where the invoice total year to date is greater than $5,000, say. And these formulas that I'm typing in are formed exactly the same way as an Excel function. So if you're comfortable with Excel, you will be comfortable with creating formulas for filters and calculated columns in grid view. So, and there's a full set of functions, of course, including ands and ors and if then else and not and all that, and also a set of query functions. So I could say instead of invoice total year to date is greater than 5,000, I could say invoice total year to date is bigger than query number how much, and make the default 5,000. And now I have a filter here for large customers, and I can say the default is $5,000. How much? $3,000. So I have two customers that we've done more than $3,000 invoice total year to date this year. I'd like a total on this column, and I'll go back to showing all the records here. After you've created a view, you save it away. I'll save this view as customers. You could see I was practicing while Alan was teaching. So here's my customer view, and I can sort by a column just by double-clicking at the top of the column, and easily sort it in quickly in ascending or descending sequence. I can go back and add columns to a report. So I'll add a salesperson here. I don't want amounts. I want salesperson there. Okay. So now I have the salesperson over here, and I'll left justify that. And here's my 3 columns. And I'll make them like this. Okay, so here's my a single view into the customers. I can sort by salesperson so that when I refresh the view, it comes in salesperson order. I can summarize when I've set a sequence and see the actual salesperson totals with the ability to double click and see what the individual ones are. In order to make this a little more presentable, I can hide columns when the view is summarized, so that when I'm looking in detailed form, I can see that column, and when I summarize it, I'm just looking at the salesperson totals. I can add from another table. I can add from receivables. I would like to see the salesperson's name. So now I have a slightly better looking view when I hit the summarize button. And this I can, so that's the kind of thing quickly put together to answer the questions like how many, or what's the dollar value of invoices for Rachel, and what's the invoice total year to date. Now, just so that we don't completely run out of time here, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to show you what happens when you add lots of views to because you can have multiple views sitting in a workspace. And here I have all of the customers and all of the customer transactions, and I can link from one column over here to a view down here, so that if I want to see Able Cables transactions, I can just double click on Able Cables and see their invoices. So their balance outstanding is 1982.20, and here's all the individual invoices that make that up. And you'll notice there's a view button here. So if I wanted to see the actual invoice that went out the door, I can click on the view button, and the invoice will be open for me to view, because we automatically generate a PDF of every invoice that's gone out and attach it to the transaction. Over here on the other side, I have AP vendors. I have a look into the AP vendor file. I can ask to link from the AP vendor master to the AP vendor transactions. And so if I'm looking for deluxe office supplies, I can see the vendor transactions that are there for them. And what's interesting about this is in AP, we also allow you to attach transactions. So I can see the invoice that came in from this particular vendor and drop it and pop it to view. Or if I'm subject to audit, I may decide that I want to send this out to Excel for the auditor. And GridView will take this view and drop it to Excel. And you'll notice in Excel that you also get the view button. Now, Excel doesn't know about the Adagio viewer, so it launches the current Acrobat viewer. And I'll just ask another poll here. Let's see. Just to make sure yeah, I'm kind of curious to know whether you have a need for this kind of customized reporting out of your current accounting system. There are other tools available in Adagio, a full ODBC connection if you want to use Excel's Get and Transform for doing an Excel style dashboard. There's 2 items I didn't get to today. One was showing the creation of a shortcut on the desktop, but I will show you that one of the things when we sent that data out to Excel, okay, there we go. I'll just close. We've just got a few people click on the. Oh, close the poll, and it kind of divides 50-50. Well, a lot of people say it's not applicable, which is interesting. That I'm glad to hear that the entry-level products are meeting your reporting needs. Just probably, or maybe you just never get asked for this kind of customized reporting. Just to show you what happened when we hit that Excel Direct button, the Excel spreadsheet that we created has been put here in the vendor transactions list. This is the Excel spreadsheet that's being displayed. And down below, these are all the documents that have been pulled out of the file folder with names created for every single vendor whose document was pulled, and subfolders showing all of the various invoices that were attached when I hit the Excel Direct button. So this folder could just be zipped and handed to an auditor with here's our accounts payable transactions and all the attached underlying documentation. And it would take you about, I don't know, 20 minutes to put that together max. So I see that it's 10 o'clock in the morning in Vancouver. That's the end of my time. I want to thank you so much for paying so much attention to me. I wish you the best of the summer, because I think this is our last presentation of the summer, and I look forward to seeing you on the technology tour this fall.
Thank you, Andrew. Alan, are you there for our wrap?
I certainly am. Thank you, Andrew, for that. I love the way it integrates with Excel. I understand we've had a couple of minor technical issues today. We tried an experiment, and in the fall, we'll clean that up. So it's a wrap, and look forward to seeing you in September.